today for a play day because this is not going to be a usual project. There's no set project. There's no rules. What I'm going to do is show you what's in your box, what you can do with what's in your box, and then I'm just going to play around a little bit, all right? The project is an air dry clay craft. I have used Sculpey in the past, which I baked when I was making beads. This is clay. Looks very similar to what you would use if you were ever on a wheel, you know, throwing pots, but it air dries. And when we get to the end, I'm going to talk to you about how long it takes for it to air dry so that you really do have a finished product, okay? But you're going to be playing with clay and it's so much fun. Here's what's in your box. When you open it up, you'll find that you have 4 packs of the clay, which means you could make 4 small projects or you could combine clay and make something bigger. So that is an option, okay? And then you have tools that you'll use. So you have a paintbrush that can be used either for painting a finished project or using the craft glue that you're given to put on gold leaf, which is something I've never used. It's so cool. I can't wait to show you what it's like. I'm sure you've seen it in shows, but this is very fun. And then you have some paints that you can use when it's finished to paint. The foil, the gold foil is really fragile. So when you open your pack, you're going to have 2 sheets of it. And you're going to see that it is so delicate that you're not going to be cutting it. You're just going to be tearing pieces of it to use with your glue. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then you have an actual booklet that gives you inspiration and gives you ideas. And there was one in particular in here that I loved. That is one that I would try at home. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So once you have seen what's in your box, then you might want to go look around the house and gather a couple other things. So for instance, I was making a coaster today and I needed to roll out. I used my water bottle and it worked just fine. But if you have a rolling pin that you don't need to use again for food, you could roll out with a rolling pin. You might have craft cutter, you know, X-Actos, some bamboo skewers. I have these all over the house because we made that project where we used skewers to make a basket. I have a bunch of those. You can find cookie cutters that you can cut with. There was even a suggestion to make imprints. So you can use lace or you could use something that makes a design once you pull it up. So you're going to want to go hunting around the house for some things. If you decide that you need a straight edge, you're going to want to use a metal one. So we have a metal ruler here because ultimately the clay gets wet and you want to use things that can accommodate that. So when you get ready to work, you need to have something underneath that is your work surface, okay? You want a clean, flat surface. You can use cardboard, you can use a plastic mat, you might have parchment paper at home or waxed paper, but ultimately you need something that you can get gooey on. And then separate from that, you're going to need something to put your finished products on to set them aside to dry, all right? I am the kind of person who, when I was trying to mix paint into the clay, forgot to use a rubber glove, but you might want to do that. I have blue hands. I also have gold all over me, so I'm really kind of sparkly today. And I think that's it. I think those are our tools. And then ultimately you make what you want to make and you let it harden and then you embellish it. And the opportunities are endless. So when I got here today, our fearless leader Travis had made what we would have called in kindergarten a pinch pot. And I would make one of these to use for salt. I'm one of these people who keeps a salt pot at the stove. So something like this, I probably wouldn't put gold on it if it was going to be that. But he was making a ring bowl, which is adorable. And so he embellished it with the gold. And putting the gold on comes after it is dry. And you'll be using the glue and painting it onto the pot and then laying your, and letting it get a little sticky and laying your gold on. And you really are just laying it little pieces around to create that effect. And I love this. I think this is adorable. I came in and with my trusty water bottle, I created what's going to become a coaster because we're a big coaster family. I'm a fan of Alice in Wonderland. So I used a bamboo skewer while it was still soft and put in drink me, which is one of the fun little sayings when she was experiencing some magic. When I have a dry product, I'm going to use, and there's this suggestion in the book, an emery board to file my edges to get them smooth. And then I'm going to paint over the project, right over the letters, to give it a little color. And then if you wanted to, because your brush is really a fine brush, you can go back and highlight letters. I used a skewer like this just to cut the letters. And you can gather plastic forks, whatever you want to use to make designs. So that is the coaster that I'm working on. And then I decided to play around with the paint, not just to paint a finished product, but to actually try to color the clay itself. So there was a suggestion in the book of adding acrylic paint. We learned you needed to put a little water in there as well, and you really are working your clay. It's not a quick fix. Like, you really have to play with it. It really is a play day. You play until you can work your paint into the clay. I found that you're really going to end up with what I would call a marble defect. And so I got excited about using some leftover clay from my coaster, and I made a little robin's nest, and I used the marbled clay to make 3 little robin's eggs that are loose. They are not affixed. They'll actually come out. And then I just used the skewer to make the twig look, and then I could go back and paint this when I'm done and have an actual little robin's nest, which I love. So I went from this to the eggs, and that was just from dropping paint in, mixing, dropping a little water, mixing till I got where I wanted to go. And then with leftover blue, I decided I wanted to try one of the effects that's in the book that talks about marbling. And it's so cool. They used 3 colors. I only used 2 today. And once you have your colored clay, you do the snake, and you just keep doing this, right, until you have a strip. It will elongate in your hand. And if you need to add water to keep it from getting crumbly, you can do that. So you want to make sure you have your water to work with. And I just did this until I got a skinny little rope. And I used 2 colors. I did 1 rope of blue and 1 of pink. And I ended up, this is not a product, this is just a sample, but I ended up with a marbled effect of pink and blue. And what they were doing in the book was 3 colors. So that would be even more exciting. That would make a really pretty little pinch pot, I would think. So those are the things that I was playing around with. When I go home, the one I'm going to try that's a little bit more in depth is in your book. And it's where you take a glass jar and you're going to be shaping your clay around the glass jar so that ultimately it can have water in it and plants. So I think that's really charming. What they did in the book was succulents. I personally kill succulents, so I would not be using those. But I do think that you could do any number of things with a glass jar that's within what you've made. And you have directions to do that in here, but it ultimately is that you're going to use your rolling pin to get it flat, and then you're going to shape it around either a jar this size. I would probably use one of the little yogurt jars and have something small. I use those as little holders for incense, so then I could have this decorative incense holder. And the effect that they used for that one was they were pounding holes in it, which was a really cool effect. So that's something I'm going to be trying later. So this is endless. When you open your pack, you're going to find that it's pretty crumbly, okay? And it really is like you might want to sit down for a little bit and just play with your clay and take it from that crumbly stage And if you need to, add a little bit of water to get it to a softer stage, okay? And once it gets like this, then you really can just decide where you're headed. I'm going to use the rolling pin this time, not my water bottle. And it's almost like making cookies. And you're just going to keep adding water. Now, one of the things that they talk about is getting rid of the cracks. I actually like the cracks. You have to decide if you're going for a crackle effect. And remember that if you have crackles, you can wash that, sponge, paint or something on it to highlight those crackles. Or you can work with water. And I'm just going to demonstrate. I have crackles, but if you add water and you just start smoothing, all the crackles go away. So you're going to end up with the clay on your hands. Keep that in mind. So if you don't like ooey gooey, use your gloves. But you can get it really smooth. And then you can use your knife. For instance, for this, I used a cutter. You can use your knife to cut around it. And then you can use the water to smooth an edge. I decided not to dwell on that because I'm going to go back and sand it a little bit. And ultimately, I'm putting this gold leaf on. So it's not going to matter if that's a perfect edge because it's going to get covered like the pot. Okay? If you have it nice and smooth, that's where I think it would be really fun to, where did I put it? I've lost my lace. I don't see it. I know it's there. There we go. You can make a design. I actually have bought pots that have the lace design. Leave it in, let it dry, or take it out now. I would take it out now. Oh my gosh. That's really cool. Okay, so you could do that haphazardly, or you could do it in a pattern, but it makes a really nice effect. And anything would work like that. So if you have a fern or something live that you wanted to take leaves and imprint them, I also have pots that have that imprint in them. I just think that would be really stunning to put a live plant on and get the imprint of that. And then remember, you can always go back and highlight what you have imprinted with your acrylic paint, and you can make it as saturated in color or as washy as you want. You have a paintbrush, but you can also, I bet from previous boxes, you have the little sponges you can use to sponge your colors on. And I always love when we make something and I've already bought a bunch of these and realize this is something we can do on our own, and that makes it personal and really, really fun. So I wish you a fun play day. It's going to take a while, right? It's going to take some time to get your clay soft, to decide what you're doing, and then to work the clay. Even working to work on a pot, you need to get it pretty thin before you start bringing it up to make your edges. So it does take time. It's not a kid's project. It's an adult project. And then you have to have the patience to put it aside. And you're going to let that clay dry for 3 days before you start playing around with paints and embellishments. And the other disclaimer is that if you use this rolling pin or your cookie cutter for this, it probably isn't going back in your kitchen. So when we talk about your craft arsenal, you would be adding this, okay? Now I am just gonna wet this clay off. I love this lace. I wish I could give you a close-up of that lace. And I just wanna show you that how tiny, probably can't even see it, the gold leaf is when you start tearing it off. So I just wanna remind you that when you take this out of the bag, you're going to work very delicately, and you're going to want to put your glue where you want it to go and let it get a little tacky before you start adding. And This is killer. I mean, I just think that's the bomb. And then you get a little glitter effect all around it. Remember that if you want, you can get your initial on the bottom because then it's from you. And I have seen pots where there were inspirational words written in the center. So you could actually personalize this. For instance, if somebody is not well right now, you could write healing or love or whatever. And these could become gifts. So have a blast. You're going to be stronger when you're done. And thank you for joining us on the mountain for It's in the Box. I mean, I was looking freaking magical.